Hi, everyone. Welcome inside the Gate City Bank Field inside the Fargodome. I'm Logan Campbell, Jeff Kolpack, Mike McFeely join me for this post-game show. A homecoming game I'm sure NDSU would like to forget as the Bison fall to the South Dakota Coyotes 24-19. First time that the Bison have lost Missouri Valley Conference play opener in 12 years.
That's quite the stat, isn't it? How about a couple other stats? Third loss to South Dakota in Fargo in 45 years. That's a long
older than
time.
you, Campbell.
Way older than me. 20 years older than me. This game was very similar to what we saw last year in Vermilion. A very slow start, which was an emphasis for the Bison, but they just could not come back from this first half deficit. What did you notice that South Dakota just came out the jump with?
Well, and they came out last year and rallied in the second half, but this game just had a different vibe whatsoever. The longest play the Bison got all day was 20 yards. That explosiveness just wasn't there. And they came out in the second half and did what they had to do. And they scored right away and cut the deficit. But then they got South Dakota on a 3-and-out, and you think, okay, things are rolling. The Bison again go back. It's 21-10. Had a chance to get in the end zone. Couldn't do it inside the 10. Settled for a field goal. And I think game, set, match was when South Dakota was only 5 possessions all game.
Yeah.
Goes 8 minutes the other way. Game, set, match.
What stood out to you about South Dakota?
Well, what stood out to me about this game was that it was just a stunner. I mean, an absolute stunner. North Dakota State's the second-ranked team in the country. Through the first 3 games, we thought the Bison were, if not at 2019, 2021 level, surely one of the teams that could win a national championship this year if everything went right for them. After this game, you kind of go, wow, I mean, how good are they really? I mean,
we don't know. Yeah.
I mean, this just totally upends the season if you're North Dakota State, where you're going, all right, we're 3-0. You thought they were going to be favored pretty heavily in these next 2 games and go into Grand Forks to play UND at 5-0. Now they're 3-1. Missouri State road game coming off this, I don't know, and then going up to Grand Forks now is a whole different deal. And so you wonder just how good this North Dakota State team is. This was a game that the Bison had to win. It's homecoming. They've played well the first 3 weeks. They're coming off a bye. I know that South Dakota was as well, but the Bison are coming off a bye, and they came out and frankly stunk it up in the first half and gave themselves such a deficit they couldn't come back. And they played okay in the second half, but when they needed to make a play defensively all game long, they really couldn't. And so, you know, I think you guys were a little more positive about their defense after the first 3 weeks. I was after the first 2 weeks. After Central Arkansas, I was kind of going, I don't know about this defense totally. And then after today, it's like, wow, they didn't really do anything defensively that stood out. They didn't create a turnover. They really didn't have many tackles for losses. They were just kind of giving up yards and first downs. Couldn't get off the field.
You say we don't know how good they are. The team doesn't even know how good they are. Zach Mathis told me after this game, I guess we're not as good as we thought that we were. So that was very
the quote
interesting
from
to
Jake
me.
Kava in the press conference, we got our ass kicked.
Yeah.
And that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
All 3 phases of the game, we got our ass kicked. And that, if you're North Dakota State, again, that just doesn't happen. If you're a Bison, it hasn't happened in, you know, maybe Southern Illinois in the spring season. Well, I guess the championship game last year down in Frisco, but you know, a regular season game, the 2021 spring season, if you count that, and you know, prior to that, when did NDSU get their ass kicked in a game? To quote Jay Cobb, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Well, South Dakota brings in a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback this season, Aiden Bauman. What impressed you the most about this quarterback that we saw inside the Fargo Dome?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, and it's a good question. Let's take the South Dakota angle for a second. The Coyotes go 3-8 last year. I mean, there's questions down there. Fire Bob Nielsen.
Yeah.
You know, get rid of Bob Nielsen.
The athletic director got up after
Dave
the final
Herbster.
regular season game and said, "Oh, you know, he's coming back. We got an extension." And he felt he needed to do that.
I did see Dave Herbster. He's on his way out. I think he's taking another job. He's got to be, patting himself on the back. He gave him a new contract, and Bob Nielsen restructured things. He changed his offense. He hires a guy who beat NDSU, South Dakota State's Josh Davis. He was the passing game coordinator for the Jackrabbits, who's been part of play calling and beating NDSU. And so he goes, okay, that's a great hire. And they changed their offense. They went, and we talked about it in the pregame show. Yep. They got rid of the up-tempo stuff, went more toward a little more power-based, if you will. Ran okay, just enough today, but man, that 8-minute drive after NDSU pulled within 21-13, that's what wins games. I mean,
I kept asking the press conference, and I asked Bob Nielsen about this, but it was 21-3 at the end of the first half. NDSU goes 3-and-out. USD gets the ball back with 2.5 minutes left at the 35-yard line. and they just ran the clock out.
Yeah.
And they weren't trying to score. And I'm kind of going, well, that's odd. But they obviously, doing the math, they felt, okay, they're 3 scores behind, so all we got to do is just move the ball in the second half and run the clock out. They basically just ran the clock out in the second half and ended up beating NDSU that way. They didn't feel an urgency to try to put more points on the board at the end of the first half. They said, we have enough points, now we're just going to play defense and run some clock in the second half, and it worked.
You mentioned how you had some questions about NDSU's defense after 2 games of the season. Okay, after today's game, what are your biggest question marks about them?
Well, I mean, they got beat on some big plays passing, obviously. They had Jaquise Alexander in the game for a while at cornerback. They put him in the place of Marcus Shepard. And it was a scramble play, but he gave up the big play to Carter Bell for the long scramble touchdown, the second one. We haven't been calling Logan Kopp's name. We haven't been calling Luke Wirtz's name.
Wisniewski really wasn't.
Cole Wisniewski's name. The defensive line got 0. I know that they're getting the ball out quick, but the defensive line got 0 pressure on Aiden Bauman today. Maybe 1 pressure they had on him all day long. It just kind of feels to me like they're kind of reverting back to the defense they were playing last year, early in the year, where we're going, this just isn't the NDSU defense that we've seen historically. And maybe the transfer portal and the graduations are taking their toll and you can't just fill those spots. But boy, those first 2 games we thought, whoa, this defense is back with Eli Mostart in the middle. I'm not sure I'm seeing that right now at this point.
NDSU falling to 0-1 in conference play. They have a tough test next week as they hit the road and play Missouri State. What do they need to do to bounce back?
Well, it's simple. You obviously can't, you can stew in your beer or whatever for a little bit here, but I think Ed said it after the game, and he said it more than one occasion after the game. You can't let this turn into 2 losses. And I think Jake Cava, and we'll see what they're made of, I guess. We'll see how they respond to this. Maybe there was, and I think Jake kind of said that too. It's like, well, we always beat South Dakota. They also they expect to beat South Dakota.
Yep.
Well, it doesn't work out that way, and so we'll see if things change.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the Bison haven't exactly run the ball spectacularly this year.
True.
And Missouri State is spectacularly bad against stopping the run. And so if NDSU doesn't gain, 300 yards rushing with their running backs, remember the first 2 games, it was mostly Cole Payton that got him over 350 yards rushing because he had a couple 100-yard games those first 2 weeks. I just haven't seen the consistent ground and pound that we know NDSU. They did a little bit in the second half here against South Dakota. South Dakota State's defensive line was getting worn down, but they just needed some bigger plays mixed in there. But I want to see NDSU's offensive line establish the ground game consistently, and I want to see the defense get some stops and just kind of play the stout defense up front that we haven't seen in the last 2 weeks. USD didn't rush the ball for a lot today, but it just felt like NDSU's defense, again, couldn't get off the field on 3rd down in key situations.
Well, it's interesting you say that because looking at the stat sheets, NDSU just looks like that they were the better team.
Yeah, no, they did, yep.
Right.
But that comes down to USD just basically running the clock out in the second half and having an 8-minute drive when it counted, like Jeff said.
Yep. So next week we'll get a good tell on how this team will look depending on how they bounce back. So NDSU falls to 3-1 as they lose to South Dakota 24-19. We will see you guys all on the road next week down at Missouri State. Thanks so much for watching the postgame show presented by Gate City Bake. I'm Logan Campbell, Jeff Kolpack, and Mike McFeely.